All right, what's up, guys? Chris Marley here, live from my parents' house, Connor, 'cause I'm dog sitting for them for the next several weeks. Pastor Patty Sue sends her best and see all these lovely pictures in the background. So,
I got both accounts every morning showing up on my feed. I love that she sticks with it. The
yeah,
loyalty to two accounts is tremendous. I don't personally have two accounts, but I respect the fact that she does and she
yeah.
stays at it.
Well, I mean, she's gonna have three here soon, I'm sure. I mean, you just got to keep stacking. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
Kirby talks about it. That she's going through her three-peat on Twitter. I think should be good. All right, let's get into it, man. So we do this every week. It's our live show recapping the latest rankings. And I even texted you this morning. I was like, do you want to just push back to next week? I hate this episode. Not like the episode itself. I hate this week because of the college basketball stuff. And it just annoys me to no end. But I'm glad we're here. There's a little bit of a shakeup. There's a little bit of like a change in the narrative, I think, to something that we've talked about, which is like the one noticeable difference I saw, besides Georgia taking over at number one and Louisville and Mizzou jumping in the top 10, was you kind of started to see a little bit of the SEC strength come into the picture, where the highest ranked two-loss team is Mizzou, and the highest ranked three-loss team is LSU. The highest ranked undefeated team is Georgia. I know a lot of other conferences get annoyed by that, but here's the other thing too. The biggest change I saw this week in resume was Georgia and their current opponents' records. And it went from pretty weak last week to like 29 and 41 or something crazy to now being a pretty, like, I think it's like third or fourth best of the contenders. What was your biggest takeaway in terms of teams and resume from this ranking release?
When you saw Mizzou at 9, and I was wrong. I didn't think Mizzou was going to be in the top 10. And I love Mizzou. I've been banging the drum for them for a while now. I wrote after that game on Saturday. Mizzou is not a feel good story. It's a darn good
Yeah.
football team. And I still thought Oregon State was going to be there at 10 and
Wow.
that Louisville would be at 9 and that Mizzou would be just on the outside of the top 10 looking in at 11. And so when I saw Oregon State at 11, I'm like, oh my God, they're putting Mizzou at 10. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And then when I saw Louisville at 10, I was like, wait a minute. Whoa. And then as soon as you see Mizzou at 9, that means
Yeah.
Georgia's won. That's what that
Without a
means.
doubt.
Like that was going to be the case. And that win has aged well. And Georgia fans that I talked to that are like, what should we be rooting for in the Tennessee Mizzou game? And I was like, probably Mizzou, but
Right.
I think that Mizzou beating Tennessee the way that it did was respected, and it benefits Georgia. The case for Ohio State is no longer there. That's why I said coming into this week, I think Georgia's they're gonna bump them to number one, not just because they beat Ole Miss, but because of the style that they beat Ole Miss and
Right.
how dominant that game was. So yeah, not a surprise to see the Dogs take that number one spot. Michigan fans are probably so salty right now to think like we went on the road, we had this big emotional win, and we stay at 3, and it's like, well, your resume is still really thin.
So if Michigan fans, if there are any in the chat, which I doubt there are, if you want to have that conversation, please, like, email me first because I would love to have the conversation with you. What's interesting, Connor, this is another reason why you can't trust FPI or the strength of schedule rankings. Something you talk about a bunch, and I just bang my head against the wall and still talk about more than I should. Georgia is ranked behind ranked behind Michigan in terms of strength of schedule right now, which makes no sense to me because it's like Michigan has sat here, you've waited all season to finally play anyone that's ranked, and you look at Georgia's schedule and it's like I knew that Florida win was not going to age well because Florida was just, we already saw what they did against Kentucky. Kind of thought that Kentucky might fade a little bit, and they have. But man, that Ole Miss game, like that needs to be like that should be the top of the resume. Like I don't think it's the best win in the country necessarily, but it
Definitely not.
might be. It might be up there in terms of like I don't think that's going to get them to the playoff if they lose in Atlanta after going undefeated. But it's good enough as of right now to be like, man, this is a top 4 to 5 win in the country.
Well, that's I think where this conversation will shift to is what does it look like in the event that Georgia or Ohio State, like what does it look like for those teams if they lose a game and if they are not their team's conference champ? I
Right.
think that's kind of where we have those questions. And what does it say about their resume at this point of the year? Because Mizzou's got a pretty favorable path to get to 10-2,
Yeah.
and that would benefit Georgia greatly. And Ole Miss has a very favorable path to get to 10-2, assuming that
Yeah.
they win in the Egg Bowl against a Mississippi State team that right now has, fired Zach Arnett. Like, I think they're going to be in really good shape there. So their resume is going to age well. Whereas Ohio State, it's coming down to like that Michigan game and then Big Ten championship. The West champ never moves the needle. That's just not the way that it works. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of if that plays out that way. I do. So like the weekly metrics with the wins versus Power 5 teams with winning records. Whenever McElroy references on the show teams with winning records, he's talking about Power 5 teams with winning records,
Right.
which again, like I know where he's getting that from because I crunch those numbers. Bama's sitting there with 5. Florida State's got 5. They're the only 2 with 5. They're the leaders in the clubhouse. Georgia, Louisville, Ohio State, and Washington all have 4. Texas 3, Michigan 2, Oregon 2. That's why Michigan's still at number 3. It's not us against the world. It's as simple as that.
It is like, and I know that I hate it, and I know that Georgia fans are tired of hearing about it, and I think that's for different reasons. But that whole thing we heard before the season about how Michigan put in they installed something in practice where it was like, let's see if we could like our Georgia practice period or beat Georgia practice period. Man, if Harbaugh hasn't just taken a page out of Kirby's book, but done it like in like the wish.com version of what he's trying to do, like just against all odds, we're America's team. Like nobody. Connor, at one point this weekend, they beat Penn State. And I want to talk about this game because it was very impressive what they were able to do. But my God, at one point during the game, J.J. McCarthy and that team were mocking Penn State because Penn State mocked them by doing the binoculars thing. And I'm just sitting here like, you guys cheated. You cheated. This is how you cheated. Somebody called you out for it, and now you're mocking that. It is gaslighting like to the nth degree. It's crazy.
The Big Ten gets this from the NCAA. They get part of their findings. And that's what Michigan fans, a lot of them will tell you, well, this isn't due process. It's not due process because if it's impacting games that have already happened this year, then that's why that's being evaluated. We don't need to go on a whole diatribe about Michigan. I'm sure people are sick and tired of talking about Michigan. But like that's why nobody feels any sort of sympathy for you and why nobody's like sitting there saying, well, we need to let due process play out. It's because the NCAA usually doesn't relay its findings to the Big Ten because they don't need to have that sense of urgency if it's not impacting games that have happened this year. Now, I think Michigan is going to continue to play this up because what other choice do you have for Michigan? Let's be honest. Are you going to show up tail between the legs going, yeah, you know what? We know we're on borrowed time. This is the last dance for us.
Yeah.
We know that everybody kind of hates us. We don't really blame them. No, of course they're not going to do that. That's not the way. And to Harbaugh's point, that's kind of the way that it works in America. Okay. It's not alive if you believe it. The great words from George Costanza. Michigan is embodying that to a T. Yeah. I almost respect it at this point, despite the fact that they're the most delusional team in the country. Yeah,
I would agree with that. I think it honestly, I hate to say it because it sounds stupid, but I kind of thrive on that anyway. They have to have a lot like more pressure than almost anyone in the country on them because like if they lose now, they're the laughing stock. Like I just like they're already kind of like that. But anyway, yeah, this is obviously more of an SEC show. So let's talk a little bit more about those teams. Looking at the top 10, and we're not going to really jump outside of the top out of the top 10 like we do every week. Like I said, not that much change. The roadblock and like log jam that is seemingly at, you can make the case 3 through 8, but I'll say 6 through 8 or 5 through 8, however you want to look at it. Like, I think Florida State has a chance to bolster the resume with a win against Louisville, but it doesn't really matter necessarily because it's like if they win, I think they're in no matter what. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, Reese was bringing up the idea of Texas and Bama both getting in and blocking out an undefeated team.
What was that about?
I don't think that will happen based on the way the selection committee has approached this in the past and how dependent it's been on number of wins.
Right.
So I disagree with that point that Texas or Bama would block out an undefeated Florida State, an undefeated Washington.
Yeah.
And you could maybe, like, if you really wanted to dig into the weeds, you would say, well, what do they care? The 4-team playoff is in its last year. They're not going to have to answer if they shun the Pac-12. Who cares? It's the Pac-2 starting next year. So like there's maybe a little conspiracy theory within that if you want to think too far into it, you can convince yourself of anything at this point. I still am of the belief that we will not get the chaos scenario that we mapped out last week. And
Yeah.
even though I think Texas has played with fire a little bit, Quinn Ewers coming back, like I'm interested in kind of how that looks moving forward, and Texas can get through with just the one loss because it's Texas and Washington. I mean, like Washington hasn't played a game that's been decided by less than 10 points in a month and a half. It's like they're Texas and Washington. I just have circled. I'm like, it feels like they're due to lose a game. It just does.
Washington -8.5, Connor, with a fifth-year senior linebacker running and pick six back, untouched, and fumbling at basically the 2-yard line was. I don't want to say it was an all-time bad beat, but it was not one of my favorites. I'll say
I
that.
had Utah plus 9.5 as my lock of the week. Best
Good
beat
for
ever.
you. Good for you. What a
You're hot. You're hot.
That's a good win. That's a good win. Okay, so just here, Josh Payne talked about it real quick, and we'll get out of here with our predictions here in a second. Because, like I said, pretty light week, and it's also cake week. Not that much going on. There you go. I got you. Like I don't think there's anything really that can happen this week that's going to shock me. I don't think Tennessee is going to beat Georgia. I don't think they're really going to challenge Georgia. I will tell you that my lock of the week already is Georgia covering the 10 on that because that seems like free money, but I could be wrong. But I will say this. The only thing that I can see from a chaos standpoint in the last couple weeks, maybe Bama Auburn, because you got to go to Jordan Hare. Maybe something with Texas because they are playing with fire a lot.
Yep.
But the only one I can really think of is, man, Oregon State. And you even said you thought they were going to be a top 10 team. Probably a little bit more battle tested than Oregon. They've won 2 of the last 3. So that's also kind of shocking. What do you think is going to inevitably shake up this the most? And I'll say before championship weekend.
Yeah, it's definitely nothing in the Big Ten. I agree with you. I don't think anything shakes up Florida State. I think Florida State's got that path to 13-0. I feel pretty good about that because of what we've seen from Florida. That was a thing that I was saying in the preseason. That's going to shake up the playoff picture a lot. And I still was like, man, but Florida is like, I think Florida is a good enough team to avoid a 5-game losing streak to end the regular season to miss out on bowl eligibility. But now I'm looking at how bad that defense has been and the fact that Florida, 39 points that they've allowed in their last 4 matchups, each of their last 4 matchups, and they got to end with Mizzou and Florida State. So I was mapping that out as a potential chaos scenario of what would it look like for a 12-1 Florida State team. And now I'm even thinking like, nah, they're getting healthier at receiver. I don't see that one happening. So yeah, I mean, look, I don't think Washington gets their 13-0. I just don't. And I think they could lose a game before that. It seems like everybody and their mother is convinced that Oregon is winning that rematch in the Pac-12 championship. Everybody. Yeah. And if that happens, maybe that causes a little bit of chaos. Pac-12 is going to give us some chaos. They always do. This is the time of year when the Pac-12 is just saying that, like, we're going to get. You think we have a path to the playoff? No. We are going to ruin it. We're going to find a way. What was it, Utah in 2019? They lose in that Pac-12 championship. A game that everybody.
I was at a wedding that I was supposed to be in that I missed. Kyle Price, I think he might be in the comments, and it was like 2012 was when Bama beat LSU, lost to A&M.
Right.
And the following week had like nobody, and it was like they were out, like because this is the BCS. And then Baylor beat Kansas State, and Stanford lost to Oregon, or vice versa, or something, and it opened everything back up.
God, why don't I remember that well? 2012 was my off year of covering college football. That's why that was my off year.
It was just a weird time. I will say this too. Somebody brought this up, and I'm shame on me because I forgot. But Washington does go to Corvallis this weekend.
Yeah.
And I don't think I should have to sell anyone too hard on the fact that we all know Oregon State, I don't say it can ruin lives, but Oregon State can ruin years off of someone's life. And Oregon State, what if they beat Washington? What if they beat Oregon? Oregon beats Washington.
Oregon State beating Washington can happen with what Oregon State does in the trenches. I don't know. Like, I don't know if that Washington defensive line is going to hold up in that game.
Physical, man.
I already said on record that I think Washington wins that game, but now I'm kind of thinking about it. I'm like, that could be the first chaos scenario to happen. What if Georgia loses to Tennessee?
Dude, I have so many mixed emotions about this because I think it's such a lock to not happen, but at the same time, I would I don't think I can pull for it. Not because I don't like Tennessee, but because if you're Bama, I think you kind of need Georgia to be like maybe you don't need them to be undefeated. I don't know. I don't want them pissed off.
I look, I I don't know that that happens. I think this Tennessee team has some weaknesses,
Yeah,
but that's the ultimate chaos scenario. Is Georgia
yeah.
goes into a hostile atmosphere and you're seeing a team that down the stretch, like if you close your eyes and envision a Tennessee victory in the
I don't want to do
path
that.
of it happening, which I realize is a little bit difficult at this moment after getting
Yeah,
waxed by Mizzou, but it is Tennessee running the football in the fourth quarter, breaking off 7-8 yards a carry
right.
at will against a Georgia team that is playing its third consecutive game against top 25 competition. That's
Yeah.
what that path looks like. And that would be the ultimate, oh my God, could the Big Ten get two
Oh
teams in? Like,
God.
but like that would throw air like, oh,
Yeah.
the Pac-12 definitely, Washington's definitely got a loss to give. That would create the most amount of chaos. I don't think it happens. I don't
I don't
think it
think it does
happens.
either. I think that there's kind of this unfair part for Georgia that I'll like pat them on the back with since I'm not on Twitter right now. Like I'm not tweeting this out.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say,
Yeah,
when did you get off Twitter again?
no, I didn't do that. It would have been forcefully removed, I'm sure. No, but I think that like Georgia, we've all kind of like had this like collective like breathing like this exhale of like, oh, okay, sigh of relief, we're done. We beat Ole Miss, beat Mizzou, blah blah. Tennessee's gonna be easy. And then you got Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's not a bad football team this year, especially offensively. I don't think it's going to be an issue for them, but like there are still two games that you can't just like walk into and like waltz out of with like a dub like you've been able to do the last 2 weekends of the year for UGA during this title run. You know what I mean? Because like having Tennessee this late and then on the road at Tech, like it's like 40,000 people for the most part, but still, I don't think it's going to be as easy as people are going to discredit them for. So, all right, you got anything else you want to do our predictions? Because last week my predictions were awful.
I'm just gonna stay with it. I'm rolling with it. I'll say I'll hedge and say that Washington loses this weekend. No, 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 no. That's not my prediction. That was my prediction. Oregon loses at least one more game.
Okay.
Oregon loses one more game and then beats an undefeated Washington team in the Pac-12 championship. And so that opens the door for that means Georgia, Ohio State,
Right.
Florida State, and then we still get Washington making the playoff as a 12-1 non-Pac-12 champ. Georgia beats Bama in the SEC championship. Ohio State beats Michigan up north, and then wins in the Big Ten championship. Florida State runs the table.
Yeah, I like that. I'll say like instead of just like making like crazy predictions, like I don't even know what last week was. I don't know what it was. Pretty sure I had Georgia out of it somehow. Like,
You did. You had the entire SEC out of it. I was like, what are you
yeah,
saying?
and then you were just like looking at me like, is that your final answer? And I was like, that's it. And then I remember closing with like, I'll do my research next time and like actually think about it. So here's what I'll say this time. I think Georgia would be my 1 seed. I think they're going to handle their business and beat Bama. I still like Ohio State. People talk about Ohio State or people talk about Michigan nonstop. And I think Michigan's very, very good. But like that resume is not good enough for Michigan if they lose. And I don't think that they're necessarily better than Ohio State. Ohio State currently has the second best scoring defense in the country. Now,
Yeah,
granted, they're behind Michigan, but like people talk about this Ohio State team all the time, and they constantly talk about the offense and Marvin Harrison and why the offense hasn't been as good as it's been in years past.
it's a
And
different
just
team. Yeah,
it's a different team. And like I said this in the beginning of the year, man. Like every time I looked at like a first round mock draft, which is craziness to do before New Year's anyway. But like every time I saw it, there was at least 5 Ohio State guys, and it was always more players on defense than offense. And that's just not something we see a lot or think about Ohio State with, like correlating to a lot. I think Ohio State is still better than Michigan, so I'm going to take them. I don't think that Florida State is gonna lose to Louisville, so I'll keep them in. And I still just believe in Oregon. I believe in. Can't believe I'm going to say this, but I believe in Bo Nix, and I think that they're going to have a good enough schedule or resume to get in. I will say this, and this we're not going to get into it today, but last week I said that I wouldn't argue at all if Bama finished with 1 loss and Texas finished with 1 loss and Texas finished ahead of Bama. Starting to change my mind on that as we get a little bit closer and Bama's playing a little bit better. I'll just say it. I'll just admit it to you. I don't think it's a shock to anybody. All right, let's close it out. Tell everyone where they can I guess, to get the pod. Who's coming on this week?
We're definitely Ari Wasserman, possibly PB. PB's been all over the place though. He was in Baton Rouge over the weekend, getting Jaden Daniels game-worn jerseys and whatnot. And
is that a game-worn jersey?
I think it was. I don't know. It looks pretty clean.
It did.
I don't know, but that doesn't really say anything because Florida couldn't touch him all night anyway.
Also
So.
true.
But yeah, I think both of those guys are coming on. It's cake week, so you know what?
Yeah.
It's an interview heavy pod. We got a lot to discuss though. Ari's been all over. He's just been hammering Michigan, and Michigan fans have been living in his mentions. So love being able to catch up with him. And yeah, hopefully PB too. Haven't had PB on the show in like a year and a half, I realized. Just by accident. We both do stuff with PB, and for whatever reason, just I don't know. Haven't had him on. I guess I got to end the shun.
Well, good deal, man. We appreciate you coming on. I'm glad we did this because the viewers was actually pretty crazy. So that was good. And we'll see y'all next week. We do it every week. Like I said, Tuesday, as soon as the rankings are released. Next Tuesday, there will not be a basketball game in between. So before your Thanksgiving meal, make sure you tune in and we'll talk to y'all then.
Hawaiian roll season.
Yeah. That was an aggressive